A welcome back to our listeners and viewers of The Responsible Edge, the podcast where we explore the bold ideas, uncomfortable truths, and unexpected solutions shaping the future of ethical business. Today on the show, we're learning how radical transparency is becoming the new currency of trust and collaboration across supply chains. And we're grounding this in the Financial Times article, Companies Seek AI Solutions to Supply Chain Fragility, which maps how AI and digital control towers are being deployed to tackle supply chain disruptions, but reveals that tech alone can't fix what trust and cooperation must. And our guest today, I have to say, I'm absolutely delighted, is Laura Willemsen, Group Director of Marketing and Sustainability at Stahl. Laura, thank you so much for joining me for this show today. I'm absolutely delighted and excited to have you on.
Well, thank you so much, Charlie. It's a true pleasure, and I really look forward to the time we have together to talk about, I think, a topic that is close to both our hearts.
Indeed. And I'm slightly going off piste here, but I think when you and I first connected and were thinking about what we were going to be talking about, I did earmark this as being a particularly revealing conversation. I think anybody listening in is going to take away some really interesting strategic thoughts, if you like, about how they approach their own supply chain management. But before we get into all of that, we need to give a bit more background on Laura. Now, I very briefly introduced you and your current role. Would you mind just explaining a little bit more about what you're currently working on and what you're currently doing, and then perhaps a little bit more about Stahl as a company as well?
Wonderful. I'll take it away. I'm Laura Willemsen. I'm the Group Director of Sustainability and Marketing at Stahl. And for those people who don't know the company Stahl, which is likely, we are a global specialty player in coatings for flexible materials. So people might know the coating companies which are familiar to you, whether it's a PPG or Sherwin-Williams, Akzo. These companies all make coatings for rigid substrates. So think about the exterior of your car or the walls in your house. You know, you want to decorate them well. And what we do is the opposite. So you can find us on daily materials that you touch because they're flexible. So you drive your car and you touch your steering wheel or you touch your chair. You take your purse to the office. Or you sit on your sofa, you have your running shoes when you go for a run. And that's where you can find a bit of style. That also connects to what we see as our purpose, touching lives for a better world. We truly believe that by the coatings we offer to all these flexible materials, we can help to make the world a better place, but also to create a unique consumer experience to people all around the world. And I'm very pleased to work for such an innovative, ambitious company because sustainability is really core to what we do. And that's why I'm quite passionate also about the role that I have, because it truly matters what I do together with my team, but also together with the organization. And I will maybe have more opportunities to talk about that. We have a great roadmap, and for me, I've had the pleasure to work in sustainability for more than 10 years, always combined with marketing or with sales. I think for me, it just serves a deeper purpose in life.
Laura, that was a brilliant introduction. And I should say that we'll be linking to your LinkedIn profile and the Stahl website, etc., so that anyone who wants to sort of dive into the depths, if you like, of both your current role and obviously the great work that you guys are doing, then they can do so. I have to admit, the thing that always sort of strikes me when speaking to somebody like yourself, who is, working within the role that you're working in within an organization of the size and therefore the influence of Stahl, that it's almost that sort of with great power comes great responsibility. And that's something that I really want to dig into during this conversation in terms of how that feels for you personally. But before we get to that and we unpick that a bit more, I want us to go back to the beginnings. I want us to understand the origin story of how you have ultimately ended up where you are in your career and in your life. So take us back to the beginning. It can be childhood, it can be your education, it can be the early part of your career, but just give us a flavor of some of those really important experiences that have ultimately shaped your view of the world.
No, happy to do so. So, reflecting actually on that question that you just gave to me, Charlie, I think it started actually quite early on, and you don't realize at the time. But I'm a Dutch native. I grew up in the southern part of the Netherlands, and I had I had the opportunity actually to grow up in an area where there was still a lot of space. So we always played outside. The forest was close by. I spent a lot of time actually playing outside, and also my family always, took hikes in the forest. And not realizing that, but when you grow a bit older in your student time, every time, I was looking for happiness or maybe also, a bit of balance when you felt out of balance. Going back to nature for me was, where I felt, hey, this is where, I find my true balance. So I think that was one of the early fundamentals that shaped my life, I would say. And as a child, I really enjoyed playing outside, but also writing stories. And therefore, I didn't really know, whether I should continue more in the communication space or I should actually move into business. I like both parts. So that was a choice I had to make after secondary school. What is interesting, though, by writing stories, when I was 10 years old, we founded a small, friends group to write little booklets about nature. And we sold those door to door, and we donated the money to the WWF. So we already wanted to do good, for the environment, actually, just as a side. Yeah.
Laura, I'm so sorry to jump. I love the 10-year-old Laura running around knocking on doors with her booklet. Do you remember what it was called? Do you remember the title of it?
I don't remember the title, but I do remember that we had one with a dinosaur, and we were explaining in detail what was the material, the horn, what material was it made of, why do we have to protect not dinosaurs, what was it, the hippos, yes. So I remember that article, but we would always just, find new articles and then have that booklet. I don't know the title, but I still know the friends who participated. And I think it was, we really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. And then we went to the bank to donate the money because everything, of course, was still with real money at the time.
Wow. So you had collected your earnings and you went up. Yeah. That's so. That's a brilliant. Were there photos taken of you guys doing this, or?
I think I still have a copy somewhere, but I need to dig deep to get it. Yeah.
Well, we need. I would request access that if we can to put into the editorial. But I love the fact. I mean, that is truly a sort of there's a foresight in 10-year-old you going and experiencing storytelling with the outcome associated with environmental action and the preservation of species and environments, etc. I mean, that is a precursor to what you then go on and do. But just talk us through what happens thereafter in terms of the rest of your education, early part of your career.
I will. So I went to, of course, secondary school as well. And then I had to make a choice. As I said, do I continue in the communication space because I really like writing and then telling stories, or more into business? And I chose for international business studies at the University of Maastricht. The reason was I thought that was a bit broader because communication can be part of it, marketing can be part of that study, and it's not so specific as communications. But it's something that that the whole marketing space has always intrigued me, and I kept, focus on that. So I did my studies, had the opportunity to spend a year in the US, and also had the opportunity to go east to Asia. So I spent half a year in Asia as well. And that really shaped me from a person perspective. You learn so much about different cultures and how to connect with different cultures, how to learn, that we're all the same, but, we have subtle differences, and it's important to know those differences. And that's the link to why I chose for the industry that I've worked in ever since. Because when I graduated from university, I thought, well, I want a job in B2B. Yeah, I'm not a B2C person. I wasn't. Yeah, I like all the food products, etc. But I really wanted to have impact, and I like the people in the B2B market, really working on innovation. But I also wanted to work in an international environment. And that's where the industry, at the chemical industry that I started to work in, it matched. It's immediately an international space, highly innovative. So I joined a large chemical company called DSM. And I joined in their procurement department. So I bought raw materials for the factories. And that's how I learned so much. Yeah.
And Laura, I'm sorry to stop you in full flight, but I've got a question, a sneaky question to throw at you here.
Yeah.
When you've described that, your experience as a child of the environment and your the real affinity that you have with the natural world. What did it feel like, or was it part of your decision making around going into the chemical industry? Like, how did that fit with your concern for the environment? Was it something that you felt like there was an opportunity to sort of affect change from within, or what was your thinking around, or was that not part, in all honesty, was that not part of your thinking at that time?
No, it was, because it might seem from the outside that it's an opposite, right? You enjoy nature, but then you decide to work for a chemical company which has all these factories with maybe nasty materials. But I was actually curious, because the world that we live in is due to all the innovations that have taken place, and it requires chemistry, to make the car, to make the mobile phone, to create everything that we have. And I was just keen to understand, okay, so how can, this industry help us in that transition as well to a better world? And because, I like, these brains that see opportunities. And I learned very quickly what it takes to make something. And that it's not a contrast. One can go hand in hand. Very early on, we already saw that we can learn a lot from nature and apply that into chemistry to make something which is more, environmentally friendly, for instance. And those were the early days. Now you see many more opportunities. And we could do so much more, Charlie. I fully believe in that if we would just all be open for that.
Well, we're gonna come on to touch on that, but would you therefore describe yourself, Laura, as like, and again, I'm sorry if I'm butchering these terms, but as a pragmatic environmentalist, i.e., let's see the world around us and work out ways of being able to improve from within what we're doing, and as you say, find those innovations through an acceptance that these are the tools that we have at play.
Yeah, I think I'm a realist, and I'm very pragmatic in also my work, because yes, I like nature, but I also like my life. I wouldn't want to go back to prehistorical ages. I mean, I have to be honest with you as well, and I think we all have to be realistic that the life we have is also due to all the activities that we do, whether that's in a factory or whether that's in a supermarket. I think now it's for us to say, okay, what can we do with all the knowledge that we have to make it better, while we can still retain, the quality of life that we have. And I think it's possible.
Here. I give out here's, Laura, for guests that nail particular points. And I think that's the first. I'm sure you're going to have many during the show, but I'm going to give you your first one. I couldn't agree more. I think the notion of, people wising up, if you like, to the experience that they enjoy day to day, and understanding that yes, we need change, but we need change that is sympathetic to what we've become accustomed to. So I think that's totally understandable. Sorry, I stopped you mid-flow. You just mentioned you entered the chemical industry. What happened next?
Yeah, so I spent 6 years in procurement roles, and that was very insightful to understand business from different perspectives. But as said, storytelling, marketing, that was still a passion of mine. And after 6 years, I said, well, I've learned so much, but, I want to progress into the front end, into the marketing and commercial area. And then I had an opportunity to join another company, which was looking for a marketing manager to position a business and to really position it with a sustainability angle. And that's where the real sustainability role came into play. So it was still early on in my career, and it's always, well, I found it at least quite challenging to move away from your first job. But with that, potential, I jumped on it because I thought, wow, this is really what I want to do.
I was going to say, it brought you back to what you had always known was the kind of what came so naturally to you as a young person. Okay. So you move into this marketing manager role. How long do you work there?
I worked 15 years for the company. Oh. And 15 years. So I moved into the marketing role, and it was great because I could build it from scratch with the people around me. And I still work with some of those colleagues from those times. From marketing, I also moved into sales, and then I moved back into marketing again. And in that second time when I was in marketing, that was say 8 years in the company. I actually saw from the market that there was more and more interest in sustainability topics. So companies were looking for instance, solutions with a lower carbon footprint, or we were also people had questions about recycled materials, for instance. And rather than sitting and waiting or thinking, when will someone create a new role, I just started to, develop narratives and of course also data-driven content to re-discuss that with customers and internally. I had quite some debates, and I still remember one of the business managers saying, "Laura, look at the data. How big is this market? Do you really think that your work is going to have any impact?" And I said, "Well, yes, it will have impact." 3 years later, this skeptical person said, "What can you do quicker for me? What can you do quicker?" So and for me, that was, the proof of the pudding. So it was very rewarding, and I just built it from scratch. And from there, it became bigger and bigger, actually, Charlie, till that led to the role I have today, so to speak. So I took it from the business opportunity, and now, I look at it from a corporate perspective. And it just makes it, a 360, perspective on sustainability.
Indeed. I mean, I as somebody who obviously works in sustainability communications, it's like speaking to a pioneer, if you like, which is just so exciting from my perspective. Like, this is the $64 trillion question here. So feel free to say we haven't got enough time for it and you haven't paid me enough to come on the show. But during those 15 years, and as you built the foundations of your approach to sustainability communications, what were the major lessons that you learned about how to do so effectively?
Yeah, I think for me, and it might sound logical, but there always needs to be a business gain or a financial gain for the party that you speak to. And you can be so convinced that you have the most sustainable product for your customer. But unless that customer can open up a new market or can sell it, and expand their business, there's no way. It has to match the financial models that we're used to, and that is growth, and that is margin development. I can give you the best and most beautiful answer, but I think that's what I learned. And so every time you have to think, what is the value for the customer? How can the customer create new opportunities, gain new customers, and with that, they're willing to listen. But otherwise, it becomes very difficult. And I think that's also what we see in certain cases now at the broader world. Everyone is willing, I think, to move, but it's sometimes difficult, because you lose your competitive position, or, it's more expensive, and the consumer is not even willing to pay quite often. So in the end, you have to find a financial model that supports that sustainability goal.
Commercial pragmatism and realism, again, coming through as part of our conversation. I think it's a really strong message, Laura. I've got two more questions about you before we head on to this week's article. The first, and again, excuse me for being naughty and asking you potentially difficult questions, but that's what I'm here to do. Your role bridges marketing and sustainability. Some would argue that when sustainability is within a comms or a marketing function, or in a dual function, that it could therefore not necessarily become an embedded cultural operational norm within an organization, but it could be seen as essentially just a CSR and a sort of a PR CSR sort of positioning, function. What would be your rebuttal, presumably, to anyone that would suggest that?
Yeah, I actually think the combination is quite powerful because as marketing group marketing director, I'm responsible for the brand. Yeah, and the brand again is for me an expression of our strategy, and ESG is central to that strategy. So whether I talk about when I talk about the brand, sustainability is directly part of it. And I think with the combination, I also control the message that we give about sustainability and avoid greenwashing as well. And I think what helps for me personally is that I have experience in marketing, in communication, but also I truly understand the business. I have some knowledge about the factory. So I think that broader knowledge and also, that commercial sense, I would say, I think those are elements that all bring it together where, for me, the fit is perfect.
And I'm so pleased that you responded to that question in that way, because I think it actually ties into that theme that we've got going through all of this around commercial pragmatism and realism, because actually it is realistic to view the relationship between brand and sustainability and the interrelationship between the two. So I'm so pleased you responded with that. Last question on you before we move on, Laura. You have been at Stahl, and just so I'm clear, have you been at Stahl for 15 years?
No. So this is my third company. So I was at my previous company for 15 years, and almost 2.5 years ago, I moved to Stahl. But I've known Stahl for more than 20 years. So it's been a company that I've seen throughout my career.
Okay, and thank you so much for pronouncing Stahl better than I have been throughout the rest of the show. But I'm so bad at my pronunciation, so finally we got it right. Interesting, poignant question to ask. From a sustainability perspective, you've been with the company for 2.5 years. How well is it doing?
Yeah, I didn't join Stahl because I really liked what Stahl was already doing in terms of its sustainability strategy and sustainability ambition. So let me start there. It's also something I've seen because I said I knew it already for 20 years, so it wasn't unknown to me. What I like about Stahl's ambition on ESG, we want to be the ESG leader in our space. So there's a clear ambition. Then there's a clear strategic path towards 2030, where we transparently also communicate about what we want to achieve in the environmental, in the social, and in the governance side. And we report on that. So we don't only have wonderful stories year on year, we also really present the progress that we made. And that was far before I joined, that all this was done and started. But for more than 10 years, we already have a sustainability report. So I would actually see Stahl as one of the early adopters of sustainability reporting, for instance. And that makes me proud. It's a company that is not only ticking a box to say, oh yeah, sustainability now needs to be part of our strategy. It's truly embedded in what we believe is the right thing to do. So I'm very honored to be able to work for a company that really sees sustainability central to its strategy, but also that we are transparent on what we achieve, because there are also areas which are more challenging, but we keep talking about that. And I think that transparency, the avoiding as well on creating wonderful stories without data, we are very careful not to greenwash. And that's really part of the early, I would say, establishment of sustainability.
Well, from an anti-greenwash chart, it's brilliant and fantastic to hear. I'm going to ask you one more question on you, though, and I think it's really in the nature of transparency. What are those challenges for the company? What are the areas where you're looking to improve and that you're hoping to see significant sort of advances over the coming years?
Yeah. So I would classify them in two areas. One area is the area that you have under your own control. So, for instance, think about environmental topics where you say we operate our factories, and with that we emit greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
I think that's one that you can control because we can decide to invest and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So that's one that is okay. I think for me, the most challenging one is the one that is more out of our control and where we have to collaborate with the value chain. And that's related to, for instance, our scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions, where we have set an external validated SBTi target. So we are very dedicated to show progress. So by 2030, we want to reduce our emissions by 25%, and that's significant for an organization as Stahl. But also challenging areas are the ones where you need to collaborate with your customers, with the brands, to change product formulations, and to change them ahead of legislation. In the end, legislation is always at the final, the final influence to create progress in life. But we want to be ahead of that legislative pressure, and those are the I would say, in my view, the key challenges.
And thank you so much for the openness with that, Laura, and the transparency as you've alluded to before. Out of interest, just with those scope 3 emissions and the engagement, and we're obviously it's going to tie in perfectly with the article that we'll talk about in a minute. But in terms of those collaborative exercises that you've described with your value chain, how do you go about approaching that? What's the secret to doing that well?
Yeah, secret, or again, get on with it, I would say. But let me start with the suppliers, because in the end, what we buy from suppliers is creating our greenhouse gas emissions. So there we have a supplier engagement program, and we started to really engage actively with our strategic suppliers who have the biggest impact in our scope 3 emissions, to explain what our ambition is. And to really engage, what are your plans? What are you doing? So that we can see if together, if we continue buying or we continue changing the raw materials, what can we obtain from that raw material group? And from there, we also have a program with smaller suppliers to really see where can we identify opportunities. That's at the first area. On the other side, you have an existing portfolio, and you need to understand where the biggest impact in that portfolio is, and if you have opportunities to make shifts in the portfolio. We use different technologies. Think about, for instance, that you have different colors, right? And could you move from blue to purple, for instance? If you can move more from blues to purples, your greenhouse gas emissions reduce. So there's a lot of active portfolio management analysis happening to say, well, can we push customers into a direction where they have a benefit of getting a performance product with a lower carbon footprint, and we also reduce our emissions? So it's from both sides. And then you look at, where do we need to innovate? Where can we replace certain raw materials? So we have, as we define, different buckets that we analyze and see how we can, in the end, all bring it together to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in our portfolio. But it requires value chain collaboration, because you need to work with your suppliers and you need to work with your customers and even the brands. So we also really work with the brands who serve the consumer to really get that buy-in.
We need everybody on the table, around the table, not on the table. We don't condone standing on tables here on the Responsible Edge. Laura, that was absolutely brilliant. As you can see, totally obliterated the timings for the show as expected, because I knew I was going to have lots of questions for you. Let's move forward now, if possible. Would you mind providing our listeners and viewers with a bit of a summary of the article that we've alluded to a couple of times, and then perhaps just picking out whatever you found to be most interesting in the piece?
For sure. So I was asked indeed to review the article, Companies Seek AI Solutions to Supply Chain Fragility. And the article actually starts with, I think the time we all remember quite vividly, COVID times, where we saw that there was big disruption in value chains, and therefore data and transparency of data, transparency in value chains is becoming more and more important. I think also with geopolitical situations nowadays, we see that, there's quite some volatility in value chains. And how can organizations set themselves up, be well prepared to reduce the risk in value chain disruptions that we see more and more? One of the solutions provided, of course, in the article is AI solutions, where you can build scenarios, but you can also really use AI tools to create more transparency about the raw materials that you use, the products that you make, and how you ship them to the final end consumer. And my takeaway from this article is, I think particularly in the ESG space, data is an evolving topic. I think we see more and more demand for data when it comes to ESG, because we want to understand what we produce. The customer wants to understand what they buy. And we also, of course, see legislative drivers to really get more transparency about company performance, on environment, on people, on governance as well. So I think everyone who works in the ESG space sees, the need. How do you manage your data? How do you collect your data from all the raw materials maybe that you source to communicating data in a sizable manner to your customers. So I think that in itself, Charlie, is something that I also recognize. And we also look for automation. And I think AI can definitely play a role in that. And I think it will have a growing role because the data is becoming more complex. And AI can help to manage unstructured data well. Where I would challenge the article a bit is actually to say that value chain transparency, there is a need for value chain transparency, but I don't think, tooling is the solution to that. And why? Because in the end, demand is created somewhere, right? Consumers buy something because they have a need for that. And I think where we can have the best tooling, but where we will still lack is the fact that we need to educate that consumer better so that they can make the right choice, right? Because with all the data that becomes available and because it's not well aligned and not aligned from a company perspective, a government perspective, or even a country perspective, what do you believe as a consumer is what you see on your social media? And I think unless we tackle that, and maybe that's a utopia, but unless we tackle that, then, we start asking in the value chain for more and more data, but in the end, are we successful to offer consumers the relevant data to make the right choice?
Laura, that is a brilliant observation. And by the way, I should say for any of our listeners and viewers that want to check out the source article, we'll link to it in our various materials. But Laura has absolutely nailed not only the summary, but actually has picked out something that I hadn't even considered, which is so fascinating, that almost this whole pitch of sort of the silo, if you like, of the supply chain or the value chain management and the relationships between the players within a supply chain, that's missing the point, because you can have as much collaboration and as much data visibility, et cetera, and transparency as you like to manage that side of things. But if your customer doesn't have a compelling and clear insight, if you like, then they're not able to make the decisions which will ultimately affect the value chain and how it then engages with the customer. It's a brilliant observation. If I've understood you correctly, I might well not. But how do we? Let's move forward with that though. Then, like, what do we do in order to address that? Like, how do we create these kind of consensus, if you like, on the data and the insights that customers are using to make their decisions?
Yeah, I would really ask everyone to really collaborate, in value chains, and in industries, because I think that's the only way. And we have a good example in the fashion industry where brands all got together to work on they call a zero discharge world. So in the fashion industry, you use certain materials to produce your garments. And not all of them are safe materials. So over time, they're really excluding more and more of those materials, and all the ingredients that are used for the garments, need to be tagged with a certificate. And I think the beauty in this example is that the big brands all got together and said, well, we need to establish, a guideline together. And then at least you have one guideline, so you have one outcome to the final consumer as well in the end, to say, well, this meets those requirements, and that's linked also to government requirements. So because there's so many, think as a consumer, if you go to your supermarket, how many labels do you see? This is sustainable, this is bio-based, this is, star 4, star 3. But what does it tell us, So I think we need to work together to say, what are the certificates that we all stand by and that we all support and that give, options to consumers. So for me, it's the collaboration.
I think there's so many bits in that, Laura, to pick out. But I think that whole idea of, I actually mentioned this on a show, we have been, if we think about the experience that we all now have as customers engaging with information in the modern digital world, we're so inundated with different perspectives, different silos, different echo chambers that are ultimately, presenting different versions of the truth, if you like, that it does become incredibly difficult to actually understand what's going on in any particular circumstance. And what that then leads to, from what I can see, is an apathy associated with, well, if I can't trust in any one single uniform view that has been presented, I'm just not going to, I'm going to close my ears to the noise, and I'm just going to make whatever the most convenient and easy and perhaps status quo aligned choice is that I can make. Okay. And that's the problem. I think you've absolutely nailed that. So, okay, coming back to the theme that we've had going throughout this conversation, which is we need commercial pragmatism at the heart of decision making. How do we, or what are the keys, do you think, from a commercially pragmatic perspective, of getting more examples like the fashion industry example that you've described, to get more of those occurring? Like, what do we need to do to stimulate those sorts of initiatives?
Yeah, I think we need to see it as new business opportunities, first of all, and really get together and say, guys, we're going to do this, because the current, we need legislation, unfortunately. I think it's not a sexy thing to say, but we need more short-term legislation, but we need also legislation which is coherent around the continents. Because I think that's lacking. So then no one is moving. But also companies, I think they have to take their responsibility, because I truly believe there is an opportunity if you develop a sustainable business. But doing it together, then, also customers and brands, they will move forward. But you need to get together with the brand, with every element of the value chain to make it happen. That's the only way. And set a commitment. Yeah.
And is the reason, because you've just described, Laura, and like for anybody listening in, like you've just described a really compelling case as to why any organization sitting there thinking, okay, why would I choose to collaborate in that way? Why would I choose to engage in that way? Well, you've just described why you would choose to do it. What are the reasons in your mind that we don't see as much of this happening in the commercial world? Is it just purely and simply that people are, competitive and aware of their competitive position and not wanting to engage, or are there other reasons?
No, I think it's we tend to live by the day, and we see the world as it is. So indeed, you are my competitor, so why would we speak? And we see one customer. I think it needs a few brave companies of size that can have that impact to say, guys, let's now, start something together, because it can help every company that participates also in their brand, in their brand reputation. And really, I would even say highlight the beauty of certain industries. But it takes a few companies to step back, I think, reflect and say, where do I want to be in 10 years' time? Is, the day-to-day operation helping me to get where I want to be? No, I think we need to be a bit disruptive, and then you can do it. But it takes a bit of reflection and stepping away of the day-to-day, I would say.
And and let me ask you this, because this is a theme that keeps coming up. And again, somebody like yourself working within such a big organization, I'm keen to get your take on this. I've had a few conversations about like leadership, and we've talked about regenerative leadership. We've talked about courageous leadership in the sort of, the space of ESG. Is it as simple as, thinking about the equivalence of your role and of you working in a number of other large companies out there? Is it just about your mindsets and your sort of viewpoints that's the crux? Because if you could get 10 of you working in other huge organizations around the world together, that's where the magic can happen in terms of working out ways of doing things differently. Is it that simple that we just need individuals essentially just to view the opportunity here?
Yeah, I think it takes a few individuals indeed to see the opportunity. And at the same time, we have big challenges ahead of us. And I think those challenges can also help us to come up with new solutions. So have a mindset indeed that are pragmatic, but say, come on, we can do this. But also have some visionaries to say, well, this is the key challenge and this is how we overcome it. So a bit of innovation with that as well. I think in that mix, you can do so much.
And do you find with your work, I want to bring it back to like your experience here, are there any kind of particular characteristics of the relationships that you've built with value chain partners that you are collaborating with, like in this way that we're describing? Are there any like key characteristics to the relationship that you typically have with the people that you're working with there? Like, what's it like, that experience when there is that openness, there is that transparency and working towards mutual benefit?
So I think what you see is that people truly believe in that it is possible and we can achieve something. I think it starts with belief, right? If you don't believe yourself, you won't get there anyhow. And there are people who also see that in this time in which we live, you can't do it alone. You need to collaborate. There's no time anymore to do it by yourself. You have to do it. And I think what's very important as well is that I have a position in the organization, but I can only do it because the rest of the organization is also very supportive, and we do this together. So it's not a one-man show. You also need to collaborate with organizations who really see sustainability as a central part of their future strategy.
I love it. You've provided a blueprint, Laura, I think, for the mindset required in order to stimulate this sort of change, which I think is a brilliant place for us to kind of conclude on the article. I now want to ask you, I know there was a whistle-stop tour through the article, but I now want to ask you the magic wand question to conclude, which I'm fascinated to see what you're going to do with this. Laura, if I was to hand you a magic wand and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, I think no surprise, but I think we don't live in we live in quite a challenging environment where I see that we're further apart than we've ever been in certain areas, and also the geopolitical climate is changing quite rapidly. So my magical wand would be that we truly all, see that this is the way forward, that we can create a sustainable, but quality living for everyone, and we collaborate. And I think we really have to reconnect, set our differences apart and say, we can do this together and we will do this together. So for me, it's collaboration and really going back to the true connection.
I love that, Laura. You're going to get your second here of the show, because I couldn't agree more. I think you also touched upon something really crucial there, which is the need for collective, the consensus on the sort of narratives around the issues that we face, the importance of the things that we need to do, etc., that then leads to, it's almost the breeding ground, if you like, for then the collaboration to take place. And almost that first bit around collective appreciation of the issues at play is the key. Laura, I know that was a whistle tour, but it's been an absolutely brilliant conversation from my perspective. I really enjoyed learning from you over the course of the last 45 minutes or so. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully we'll be able to snaffle you for another show in the future if you've enjoyed it too.
Well, thank you so much, Charlie. It's been a true pleasure. And good luck with your show. I look forward to the next episodes.
And that's all for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big thank you to Laura Willemsen for showing us that the road to resilience is paved not just with data, but with daring honesty. This episode was brought to you by the Andrew Greenwashing Charter, a not-for-profit movement of responsible communicators challenging greenwashing and championing truth in sustainability. Visit antigreenwashcharter.org to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.